Hi, so Robin Gamble here, Scholar Warrior Podcast, and I'm in London. It is freezing, you can see my nose is even red, like Rudolph, and I'm in London to meet a master of improvisation, which I'm very excited about. So this is a scholar, the scholarly part of the Scholar Warrior Podcast. Now, improvisation has got massive benefits in many arts and many disciplines, in the martial arts, in music, science. So it's going to be really interesting to find out what we can learn from an improv master and what skills are transitional and maybe what techniques regular everyday folk can use from improvisation to apply in their own life for their own success. I'm really excited for this. Okay, today on the Scholar Warrior Podcast, we are talking about improvisation, which can be an incredibly powerful tool when applied to music, dance, cooking, speech delivery, selling, relationships, sports, flower arranging, martial arts, and much more. So our scholar today is... yes,
I'm not sure I've ever been described as that before, but I'll take it.
Congratulations, today you're a scholar. Jules Munns. Is correct pronunciation?
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
Artistic director of the Nursery Theatre here in London. Jules is one of the UK's most active and prolific improvisation performers and teachers. Since graduating from the Guildhall School in 2008, he's performed with groups including Sitting in a Tin Can, the Maydays, Music Box, and Impromptu Shakespeare, as well as playing in shows including The Playground, Men with Coconuts, the London 50-hour Improvathon, and his two-person show 10,000 Million...
I forgot I did that.
You've done a lot.
Yeah, I forgot that was
done
really
a lot. Including his show 10,000 Million Love Stories, which has toured globally. Mm-hmm. He has performed in Finland, Germany, Pakistan, Spain, Portugal, Canada, and the US. He's co-artistic director here at the Nursery, the founder of Slapdash International, London's longest-running festival of improvisation, and he specializes in emotionally grounded physical improvisation, which leans towards theatre. He loves a herald and a deconstruction, as well as working with group dynamics in teams and personal feedback for individual improvisers. Jules, welcome to the Scholar Warrior Podcast.
That made me feel quite pressurized. There's a lot of stuff to live up to on there, isn't there?
No pressure. So we have already run through some very interesting exercises, which give me a taste of improvisation, and very enlightening. But I'd like to start with your background.
Sure.
And how you got into this field. So what was your earliest memory of making something up on the spot?
Oh, wow.
We're going right back.
Yeah, right back. Not even in kind of an improvisational context.
No.
I think I got into it because that was never really my tendency. I was definitely I was one of those kids that liked to spend a lot of time by myself, and I was a reader, and I was the nerdy kid. So one of the reasons I got into improv was because it was such an uncomfortable thing to do, because it's essentially collaborative art. You're working with other people. There are competitive forms, but in competitive improv, the competition is not the point in the slightest. Really, it's making a fun show. So when I got to drama school at the Guildhall, as you mentioned, which is just a couple of streets over from here, the improv classes were the ones that I absolutely hated and I couldn't do, and they gave me panic attacks, and I had to get drunk to get sleep the night before. I just didn't like them in the slightest. So that was what I think it was, the fact that I had very rarely been someone who was comfortable making stuff on the spot or responding in the moment, that led me to kind of push myself to develop that bit of my personality.
So your uncomfort in that area,
yeah,
where most people would maybe perhaps step away from it. You decided, I need to step into it.
Yeah, I didn't want to be restricted by the fact that was my natural way of behaving, and my natural response to things was to have a plan and try and deliver the plan. That felt unhelpful, and I also, the extremity of my response to those improv classes in the first couple of years of drama school was so strong. I was like, this feels like something that I need to deal with. I don't want to feel like this, and all that someone's asking me to do is a very simple exercise. There's one very, very simple exercise. Standing in a circle, someone comes in the middle of the circle, and they will do a physical motion and make a noise that goes with it, whatever that might happen to be. So I might be going, wow, wow. And then they'll make eye contact with someone at the side of the circle. That person will mirror what they're doing. The person from the outside of the circle will come into the middle of the circle. They'll change the movement. So it'll go from doing this to maybe like some other movement. And then you rinse and repeat. So you're changing the movement and then bringing someone else into the middle, taking it over. And I remember thinking, it's so stupid that I am so scared of this really simple exercise. There is no way of getting this wrong, but it puts me in my head so much. I'll be like sweating and adrenaline up and like.
Are we talking? You mentioned panic attacks. Are we talking actual panic attacks?
Yeah, actual panic attacks. Yeah.
So what does that entail?
Inability to breathe, incredibly high heart rate. Sort of your brain stops functioning. As you get less oxygen in your body because you're hyperventilating and you're not using your lungs correctly, you get like vision problems. Really, like quite crippling stuff.
I think people listening or watching might find that quite surprising, because I think experiencing a panic attack is probably a little bit more common than we think. So
and we have serious issues in this culture about talking about mental health, like openly.
Right.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So that could be quite interesting. You're someone that came from that place, and now that's your full-time job, pretty much.
It is
doing this thing.
Doing this thing, and also there's a funny thing with improviser as a job title that I can't think of. Nearly all of the improvisers in this country, and then also in America and Canada, and where there are other really vivid and long-running improvisation scenes, there's a lot in Europe as well, but it comes from different tradition. There are very few people who are just performers in the way that you would be an actor. You would mostly just be an actor. Nearly all of the great improvisers that I know will also teach. So there's this sense of passing on this knowledge and passing on this stuff which has helped you onto other people who may have the same challenges and same questions that they're facing as you had when you started. It's remarkable the number of people in improv who started out because they were socially uncomfortable, or they didn't like large groups of people, or a lot of people start out in that place, and a surprisingly large percentage of people in the improv world will class themselves as introverts, both in the kind of classical sense and the more pop culture sense.
I think that's quite surprising. I think most people think that sounds like a paradox.
Yeah, people expect it to be loud actors who like jumping on stage and shouting and making everyone watch them, but actually that's not really a large percentage of people who start out.
So does that mean, this is a little bit of a segue, but does that mean there's a kind of feeling of humility, more so in improvisation?
Yes, but more so than what? When you
more so than, let's say, traditional thespian, Shakespearean actor. I don't know. Where humility doesn't always strike me as the first thing.
Maybe, I don't know. I certainly think there's a I have a very strong feeling. I shouldn't make any pretenses to speak on behalf of all improvisers, but there's a strong feeling of what we do is inherently completely ridiculous and transient.
Right.
And there's a lovely, there's a feeling that it doesn't matter, in the sense that once it's done, it's passed away. It will never happen again, it will never be repeated.
Right.
And I suppose there is a humility to that, because no matter how much effort and grandiosity and nervousness we put into this exercise or this scene or this game or this show, when it finishes, it's just gone, and then we get up and we do it again the next day. So I suppose, that is humility, isn't it? Yes. I'm just thinking it through out loud because I've not heard it talked out in those terms, but I think you're absolutely right.
I can't help but draw, because I'm coming from a martial arts background and Chinese philosophy. You paraphrase very almost exactly a quote from the Tao Te Ching, which is one that once the job is done, you walk away.
Right.
So you don't have that attachment to it. It's not tormenting you at night and all that kind of thing. It's quite interesting.
There's an improv phrase that I don't know if it has a specific person who said it, but the best thing about a bad improv scene and the worst thing about a good improv scene is that they're both over.
Right. Yeah.
Which I really like. There was a teacher that I worked with in Italy as part of my drama training, who at the end of each class he spoke Catalan and he talked to a translator. At the end of each class, I'm going to murder the pronunciation. He would say something like "Domani alle 10," which means tomorrow at 10.
Right.
And we're working there with him for 3 weeks, so we all knew that the class started at 10. It always confused me a little bit. The fact that he would give us our call time, even though nothing changes, we're there 6 days a week. And then on one of the last couple of days, he gave this beautifully moving speech about how that's not telling you when to be here tomorrow, that's the philosophy by which we live. That is, we get up and we do it again. There is success, of course, and we should congratulate ourselves for that, and we should examine our failures without beating ourselves up for them, but also we don't do this to have the payoff where everything's finished and done. We do this because we do this.
Yeah.
The Alan Bennett play about W.H. Auden was called The Habit of Art, and one of the characters, I believe is a journalist, is talking to a very old W.H. Auden who has changed the face of poetry but hasn't done anything huge for a long time. He was sort of in his 80s when he died, I think. It was Richard Griffiths playing it when I saw it. And the journalist asked him, well, why do you keep writing? You're rich, you're successful, you have tenure at Oxford or Cambridge. Why do you keep doing it? And he said, I have the habit of art. And I feel like that's one really big connection between what we do in improv and what I experienced doing martial arts when I did it, is that we don't... martial artists, well, in my experience and for what I was doing, I wasn't doing it because I was expecting to get into lots of fights. Yeah. And I don't... I do improv because I love doing the shows, but I don't ever expect to or want to be like hugely famous or rich for that. I do it because this is what I do. This is how I define myself. This is what I get up and get excited about doing and helping other people to do.
And it's a process. It's
right.
It's not just a one-shot kind of...
Yeah.
Yeah, and that seems quite similar to the martial arts, in which if you are actually training martial arts, it's a process of personal development.
Exactly.
You're sharpening the sword. It's not because, I mean, you could go your whole life and never have to defend yourself. Right. That's not the point. The point is all the benefits from that process. And
in Julia's interview, she talked about the mountain, and then there's another peak, and then there's another peak. I've been in this just over a decade now, and I have exactly the same experience. It's just like there's always something else going further. And I remember talking to, I used to do a lot of karate, and talking to the black belts, and you feel like, oh, black belt is the defining thing of I have succeeded now. Yeah. And no, your downgrade's when you start. Yeah, downgrade's when you really start to understand it.
Yeah, it's a basic level of competence.
Exactly,
yeah.
exactly. And I never reached downgrade, but
okay.
I was so close, and then I was told I wasn't allowed to do it anymore because of the physical training which we did at drama school. They're like, you have to either leave the school or stop doing martial arts. And I was like,
right.
I guess that's,
yeah, and
Hobson's choice, Sophie's choice, whatever that thing is. Well, there isn't really a choice.
Right. Yeah, it's been taken away. Yeah, and that I've got musician friends who experience the same thing. They were told, you can't train martial arts if you're going to do this.
Yeah.
You just can't.
It's doing the wrong thing to your muscles.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So that's we kind of dipped into, you discussed martial arts, and we had some contact beforehand. You mentioned, I did do some martial arts. So, and we've just talked about a few of the crossovers, but is there any crossovers that you experienced that you think might be worth mentioning from your martial arts training? Benefits that came from that training into this?
I don't know. I did martial arts for about 11 years.
Okay, that's a considerable time.
Yeah, it's a decent chunk of time. And I stopped it a little before I started doing improv, so I'm not sure I can see like one running into the other specifically. But the points of... for me, the biggest point of comparison is that you train with the techniques and the skill sets in order to not have to think about the techniques and the skill sets. And Julia talked in her interview about the tool belt or the tool shed, which is a very, very common image that people use to describe improv. And it's the same as your basics, your techniques, or even your kata, your forms in martial arts. That is going through and knowing that those things become unconsciously fluid and easy, so that when you're going into a situation where you're going to use them, either if you're sparring or if you're performing, you're not thinking about, oh, where does my wrist go? How do I turn this? It's just naturally flowing, which leaves you with more bandwidth in your brain to be making higher level decisions. You can be doing more things at the same time. And again, using the image of driving, which Julie used, and as she said, it's a very common image used to talk about improv, that the better a driver you are, the smaller part of your brain is occupied by the process of driving, so that you can be having a conversation, fiddling with the radio and doing all those things, because your brain has simplified that down to a smaller set of commands, rather than, I'm a terrible driver, but rather than the 5 different bits of coordination that you have to put together when you start driving. So I think that's a really big point of comparison. And the other one, which is, as I mentioned before, most of the time martial arts is not really about being able to fight. It's about training your body, about training your mind, about making yourself more able to interact in the world in a way which enables you to be happier, calmer, and more productive. And I think that's exactly the same with improv. Of course, it's super fun to do shows and watch shows, but once, like meditation, once you spend a lot of time doing improvisation, nothing falls outside of the practice. You become an improviser, and that's something which is always an identity which flows through your entire life. You're comfortable with new information, whether it be good, whether it be bad. You're responsive in the moment, and you're present with what's happening and the people that you're talking to. And I think that's really, a delightful application, and just makes life easier and more happy, I think. Now I'm sounding like a cult member.
You're sounding like someone very passionate about the subject.
I am
which is we have that in common. So I'm going to dive a little bit more into the art.
Sure.
And so, for listeners or viewers, who are some famous artists that the public are probably aware of, but they may not have been aware that improvisation was in their background? And does that make sense?
Yeah, it totally does. I mean, I think the point of reference that we normally have to use when people say what is improv, because it's getting a lot more known in this country, but it's still a relatively small thing. The normal point of reference is the Comedy Store Players, or Whose Line Is It Anyway, which is a lot of the same people. And you see those old 80s and 90s TV shows, but as you said, that's people who are overtly and very clearly improvising. I think I guess Tina Fey and Amy Poehler are the two most famous people who are famous for not being improvisers, but would definitely class improv as the thing which trained them to do the thing that they do now. So Amy Poehler, who's the, I believe, head writer or showrunner on Parks and Recreation, and Tina Fey is the same thing for 30 Rock. And they both came through Second City and I.O., which are a couple of the big schools in Chicago. And a lot of the focus in Chicago is on improv, not just into improv as an art form, but improv into writing as an art form. So you get the way that American sitcoms are written is not one person sitting down and writing it the way that, like, Connie Booth and John Cleese. Connie Booth, is that right? For Fawlty Towers, you'll have a writer's room. So, and there'll always be, in every sitcom writer's room, there'll be a couple or 3 improvisers. Because that's a certain skill set that people want to have, and people will sit and bounce around ideas and bounce around lines and bounce around concepts for episodes. So there's a huge amount of influence coming from the kind of Chicago and New York improv scenes, and LA as well, but the schools in LA, most of them, apart from the groundlings, start in New York and Chicago, and then had new branches over in LA because that's where the entertainment industry is. So I think you'll find that with a lot of comedy films, a lot of sitcoms, there's just this strain of people who have trained through improv and use that as a way of doing it, writing and performing, all that kind of stuff. Steve Carell is another, very famous one. So people are consuming a lot of this media from America, maybe not even realizing where where the skill set of these guys has come from, and oftentimes it's improvisation. And that's not the only skill set, of course. It's just it's a big it's a big part of that.
So people are aware of that. That's how they've come to it. But where and how did this contemporary improv develop? You mentioned Chicago and New York. What's going on there? Why is it there?
Potted improv history, which will be accurate enough for the purposes of this podcast, is that the Second City started in the 1970s in Chicago as a way of making theatre which was making social commentary. And Second City is primarily, but that has a lot of sketch element to it. So it'll be satirical, it'll be political, it'll be commenting on current social mores. And they used improvisation as a way of creating sketches. So they would notice something in politics or life they wanted to comment on, they would improvise around that, and they would re-improvise a scene until that created a scene which they would then perform as part of the Second City Review.
Right.
Then in the late 70s and early 80s, there's a chap called Del Close, who his contention was that improv was in and of itself a valid art form for performance, not just a way of creating other art forms.
Right.
So him and Shana Halpin and a few other people split off and formed what was then called the Improv Olympic. Now, because the International Olympic Committee is very litigious, they have to call themselves IO rather than Improv Olympic. They split off, and that became a theatre where improv was the output, where Second City sketch was a lot of the final output. Not all of it, but a lot of the point of focus. So that's the kind of American school which my training comes through. So that was established in Chicago, and then other theatres split off. The UCB, which is then split off and established a school in New York. So it all kind of comes from that Chicago origin. There's that side of it. Then in the UK, in the, I believe, 50s, there's a guy called Keith Johnston, who, with a group called the Theatre Machine, started creating a lot of the improv forms, improv short-form games, or creating or adapting them, which we know from Whose Line Is It Anyway? And they would do these late-night shows after the main house show had happened, on stage at the Royal Court and other places around the kind of West End. And those forms and those games were created, each one of those games was created as a way to get an actor to do a certain thing or disrupt a certain response to a kind of scripted actor. So where Del Close was a performer and he wanted to create that improvised performance, Keith Johnson was a playwright, so he wanted to get actors to do the things that he needed them to do in his plays. And he's still he's quite old now, but he's still around. He's now over in Calgary in Canada teaching that stuff. So those are the
contemporary art.
Yeah, it's very contemporary. Well, the idea of improvised entertainment goes back as long as people have been telling stories, because you sit around a fire and tell a story. Of course, you're going to half remember it. You're not reading it from a book. You're going to improvise bits. You're going to add bits in. But this particular form of improv or impro, and there's contention over the V, is maybe 50 or so years old. It comes out of the same origins as like Chicago jazz and all that kind of stuff.
So, is there, as you're watching this media, these movies and these comedy programs, is there any? There's probably a lot of stuff that people are watching and don't realise it's improvised.
Yes.
That's true?
I don't know if it's... Some things are very overtly improvised, like Curb Your Enthusiasm, where what they do is they know the beats they want to hit in the scene, and they will just improvise it a few times to get through, to go through those beats and see what happens in that scene and take the best version of it.
Right.
With something like, again, I don't know because this is several stages of remove, but with something like the sitcoms and films we're talking about, it's not necessarily that those things are improvised as you watch them, but that they were created in an improvisational context with people sitting around bouncing ideas around and going, oh, this would be funny, or what about if we add this? So it's a collaborative writing process rather than the sort of lone genius myth that we love to embrace.
Someone's just furiously penning it away.
Exactly, and it's always, it's always a white dude with an alcohol problem who treats the women in his life really, really badly, smokes endlessly, and at 2 a.m. he's...
So that's not real.
that myth comes from, or a lot of that myth, I believe, comes from the modernist writers, the James Joyce and James Joyce and who am I thinking of? Samuel Beckett, those kind of writers who were, they sort of treated writing as almost being like a prophet or a priest bringing things to people. So it has a very individual, isolated, essentially privileged way of looking at it, because you've got to have the money, the space and the time and no kids to be able to sit and sweat away at the thing which is going to be your masterpiece, which is, what those guys managed to do. And this is just a very different way of writing. So I don't know how much of it is, of this stuff that we consume is overtly improvised, but it comes from that that flavour, that skill set, that training.
So that gives us a pretty thorough, a very efficient, I would say as well, efficient and thorough kind of overview of...
I do my best. and moderately accurate. I'm sure I will have got some things wrong, including years and things. But
so I want to go a little bit back to your experience
right.
With improv. Have you ever been on stage and experienced like a flow state?
Absolutely.
And
that's what we aim for.
That's what you're aiming for.
Yeah,
you're aiming for creating that and hitting it, creating a kind of situation where you're getting those conditions more and more.
And when you talk about flow state, you're talking about Csikszentmihalyi, that kind of strict definition of...
Well, it doesn't have to be strict. I mean, there's probably 9 characteristics or something,
there is,
right?
there,
but
yeah.
if you hit 4 or 5 of them, you can call it... Like, for example, the distortion of time...
Yeah.
Complete absorption
with the task, no separation between thought and action, all those kind of things. Yeah, that to me is what I'm aiming for the whole time.
Right.
And what I love about improv exercises and performing in an improv show is it's rigged so that the easiest and most successful way for you to perform an improv show or do these improv exercises is by getting yourself in a flow state. Yeah. Flow is on my sort of 10 books that genuinely do completely change the way that you think about everything. I love that book. This book about creativity is also extraordinary.
Okay.
That's really worth reading. So that's totally what I'm experiencing. It's not something which you are going to experience every time, and it's not something which you click into and then you just stay there for the rest of everything. You experience moments of self-consciousness, moments of coming out to it, but the more improv you do and the more time you spend on stage, the more you're able to notice that and bring yourself back into the flow state. Right. And I think one of the things I love about improv is that you're sort of taking the audience into the flow state with you as well. Mm-hmm. It's an essentially collaborative art, even if you don't even take a suggestion from the audience. The silver thread is not just around the stage, it's including everyone else who's in the room as well. They're part of the experience being created, even if their entire job is to just sit there and be present and attentive to what's happening on stage. So yeah, I mean, that's another big point of comparison between martial arts and improv, that you're the best fighter you're going to be when you're in a flow state, right? Rather than, you can't be in the middle of a spar and be trying to work out what strategy will be useful to beat your opponent.
You'll be
right.
done.
You're on the floor immediately. Yeah, and that is also the thing that martial arts is rigged to force you to be present. Because if you're not, you're on the floor.
Absolutely.
Right.
I would say that was one of the really interesting things about experiencing some of the exercises was you're forced to be in this thing, thinking right now. You can't, or not thinking, but doing right now. And you, because of improv, the nature of the beast, as it were, is you're forced to do it quite quickly. You know, and I think same, in terms of being present, and the same thing with martial arts. You can't really run away from it. Yep. It's right in your face straight away. And I think those characteristics are what makes certain arts particularly good at developing flow states when, say, compared to flower arranging or something, which of course you can, but the nature of being sort of confronted seems to bring stuff up quicker.
I don't know enough about flower arranging to do. I would suspect
flower arrangers are probably going to be on my case.
Yeah, exactly. You're going to get flamed by flower arrangers. I guess there must be a sort of online community of flower arrangers. I think that a lot of hobbies, or martial arts and improv are more than hobbies. They're kind of ways you define yourself and ways that you pass through life. I think a lot of them are different ways for people to access the flow state. And there's so many lovely examples in the book Flow of people achieving flow in ways which seems to me completely incomprehensible. I mean, this is
like tending their garden, actually.
Right, absolutely, and like
tending their garden,
gardening bores the crap out of me. Right. If that's what gets you to the flow state, and I think what's interesting about, I think the flow state is an inherently natural human state and place to be, and contemporary urban information technology connected living is constantly trying to interrupt that flow state. But actually, if you give the right little jolt, if you give the right little disruptions, it's a very natural thing for your brain to do, and you can get back there very, very quickly. So yeah, I would. Improv is my way of finding that, and my way that I help people to do that. But I would be very cautious of saying that other arts don't have it, because I don't think people would do it if they didn't.
Right.
But yeah,
that's very diplomatic. Can you tell us a time when your improv skills saved the day?
Saved the day
in a daily life kind of situation.
Huh. That's an interesting question, because as Julia stole my line in the in the interview that she said earlier, which is a very commonly repeated thing in improv, is that life is improvised, and if you will have things where you're trying to deliver a certain plan. You've got a wedding plan, this has got to happen at this time, but it's never going to fall out exactly as the plan happens. And I think the more that I've got into improv, take a step back. Very often when people teach applied improv, so improv for the life skills rather than improv for on stage, the first in is to say, hey, there are lots of times in life when things don't go exactly as you planned. Here's how to deal with those problematic times. And it's almost like, in case of emergency, break glass, get the improv out. And to me, that's fine. I get that as a justification for allowing that to be... that can be a very good justification for selling improv in a corporate context, selling improv to people who do have social anxiety or difficulty with new information or problem dealing with people. But I think for me, the fact that you're eventually, when you are just improvising or following the thing which is happening in front of you, there isn't a day to be saved. There's only the thing which is happening right now. This may be good, this may be bad. I'll work that out afterwards. But right now, there's just what is in front of me, and I'll work with that, and I'll deal with that. And I mean, I can pull examples like... mentioned a wedding, went to a friend's wedding a couple of years ago, and a lot of the stuff was quite disorganised, and I do a lot of event planning, and I run this place day to day a lot of the time, so I'm used to going, oh, we don't have this thing, or we don't have this person, we'll kind of work around that, and it helped out a lot with kind of making that wedding work, and that was a really fun thing. So I could cite that as an example, but in a way, because improvising and responding to what is immediately happening in front of you and not attaching good or bad value to anything, so permeates everything. It
could be just making a coffee.
It is, yeah. It is totally that. It's a way of approaching the world and interacting with the world, which to me that is the thing which is more important about improv than, hey, there's a problem, how do I improvise to deal with it? Which is relevant, but they're edge cases in a way. Yeah, I think that's a complete non-answer to your question, I'm afraid.
No, I can't help but connect certain things back to Chinese philosophy, and that sounds very much like spontaneity,
right?
And as a way of life, and then one of the ways to get an idea of how to do that is to look at the way a kid goes through life, which is like everything's fresh, everything's new. This is interesting. This is fun. They're in a flow state.
Yeah.
There's another quote like a good traveller is has no fixed plan, is not intent on arriving. And it feels very similar to spontaneity. Yeah,
it absolutely is. Yeah. There's a wonderful improv teacher and friend of mine called David Rosowski, who is often described as the funniest Buddhist anyone has ever met. Right. So he's an improv teacher and a Buddhist. And one of the things that he says a lot in classes, which I think is great for scene work and great for shows, and definitely something which he does. Whenever he lives in LA, but whenever he's in the country, we do a 2-person show together. One of the things which he says a lot, which is lovely, is don't be in a hurry to get somewhere. You're already somewhere.
Right.
And it's the same as the Maniera Dieci. It's like, why do we want to finish this? Why do we want to get to the end? The black belt thing. Hooray, I'm a black belt. All right, now the real work starts. Right. Hooray, I can do a 45-minute 2-person show which is themed and narrative, which is hard. That's a hard improv task. All right, cool, I can do that. What's next? Yeah. What's next? You never want to get to the point where you're allowing yourself to slightly switch off part of your brain, because then that's not satisfying. No one wants to be repeating a simple job. It's another one of the flow state things. There's a constantly escalating difficulty of the task, which means that you're always engaging enough of your brain to keep you interested, but not so much of your brain that you become frustrated. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, spontaneity that's the whole key to it. Yeah.
So I'm conscious of your time, so I want to have a look at some applications for listeners, for viewers.
Sure.
And perhaps we could think or talk about one or two things that would be useful for them. So, not that this discussion is not useful. This is very. I am learning a lot, by the way.
But this is all kind of fairly abstract stuff, and it's weird talking about improv without doing a lot of it.
Yeah.
But, you describe the games that we played earlier, or you describe any of the exercises that you do in a class. Well, why? Yeah. That's stupid.
Right.
But that's like kind of saying, getting dressed up in white pajamas and punching each other in the face. That's stupid. And that's not really the point.
Right. You got to do it.
Yeah, exactly.
And you really do have to do it.
Yeah.
You really do. Okay, we're going to get very practical.
Sure.
What's a technique for keeping calm?
What's a technique for keeping calm? So, panic and anxiety often come from a separation between the thing that is happening and the thing which you expected or wanted or planned to happen. So you go to an improv network event and you decide, I know this technique, I'm going to go around the room anti-clockwise. This is a thing that I read in a book once, which is hilarious. Go around the room anti-clockwise, pretending to be looking for someone. And you're always like glad-handing and meeting people and saying hi, but you're always with the idea of moving further forward. And you get stuck in a conversation with someone because and I'm not doing the thing that I decided I was going to do, and I decided that was the thing I'm going to go around anti-clockwise, and I'm going to shake 20 people's hands in that point of time. The anxiety or the difficulty from that is coming from the fact that there's a separation between the plan and reality. So for me, the technique is to shift from your expectation, your goal, your plan, to the presence of what is happening. So I was thinking as I was having my breakfast this morning and last night as I was going home, the hell am I going to say on this podcast? And naturally, as brains do, my brain started to say, you could say this would make you sound really clever. You can say this would make you sound really deep. And getting used to the idea of just saying, all of those ideas may be great and they may be useful, but I don't need to do them. There's strategies available to me rather than a hard plan that I have to hit. And that's shifting your point of focus from strategies or tactics onto the goal. What am I trying to do here? I'm trying to answer your questions, and I'm trying to find the point of connection between martial arts in the way that you asked me those questions and improv in my experience. And some of the things that I considered talking about this morning and last night, some of them have come up, some of them haven't. But I'm not going to leave. If I were to leave thinking about did I follow my plan, I'd be beating myself up because I didn't follow my plan. But as it is, I'm having a lovely time because I'm being present with you and I'm answering the thing which is happening right now, rather than trying to force an agenda. So that's a big thing. I think
it's like a cognitive thing. That
exactly, yeah. And it's a retraining. It's not something which you can instantly do. It's like meditation that you're constantly returning to it, I think one thing which is really useful in terms of anything which is involving interacting with the other person is that we tend to think, I've got to be brilliant, I've got to be clever, I've got to be wonderful, which is an impulse to be interesting. And then that becomes this little weird selfish circle of self-hate or self-love or whatever it is.
I experienced that. Within the first minute of trying to do the exercises, I was like, I saw it, I'm going to need to do this right.
Yeah, exactly. I saw in your eyes, I saw you thinking, I've fucked this up. Oh God, you idiot. Right?
Yeah. That happened multiple times.
Right. And the point of the shift that I was trying to get you guys to do, and I think you definitely got there for large chunks of it, is it's not about you. Yeah. Right? It's about Julia.
Yeah.
Well, this is about a cycle of productive energy going back and forth between the two of you.
Yeah.
So shifting your attention from how am I doing to how can I support my partner? How can I make my partner into the fucking rock star in the scene? Into how can I make them have the best time? Sort of unclogs the pipes to allow that cycle of productive energy to happen.
That was a really, really nice thing to experience. And I think something, again, that could have a huge crossover. You talk like in a relationship or something.
Absolutely, yeah.
Very cool. So what is a daily exercise someone could do to build their improv muscle? So this could be... we could be talking like a CEO waking up could do something, or stay-at-home dad or mum or whatever, a little thing.
Yeah, it's a funny one because improv is such collaborative art. Most of the time we do it in classes, so isolated, doing stuff by yourself is always a little bit intentional away from that stuff.
Right.
But
maybe they could ring someone up.
Yeah, I mean, you can totally do that.
The other person doesn't know that they're improvising or something. I don't know.
But here's a very simple exercise, which I love teaching in a corporate context. So we're sitting in the nursery theatre. I'm going to get you to do this exercise. So keep in a rhythm, point at a thing, and then just name it. So, for example, I would go light, chair, column, leaf. Just give that a go and do sort of 5 or 6 of those.
Peanut, camera, bush, table.
Great. Lovely. And let's just let that run a little bit more, so do a few more of those, and don't worry if you're not exactly sure what it's called. When we like box thing,
okay.
Just let it run a little bit.
We're now going around.
Yeah, whole room.
Clock, light, flask, bag, chair, stand, tripod, board game, charger.
Great, perfect. So now we're going to shift it. So the first thing you point at, you're not going to say anything.
Okay.
The second thing you point at, you're going to say the name of the first thing that you pointed at.
Okay.
So I'm pointing at the light, say nothing. I go, light, clock, sign, blackboard, camera, table, piano. So I'm always, I'm always one behind, like the Two Ronnie sketch. Give that a go.
Okay. Clock, peanuts, table, tripod, flask, chair.
Yeah, right? And you're just starting to be in that place that you were in during the exercises of I'm occupying just enough of the front part of my brain that I have no time to be working out if this is going well or badly. I'm just doing rather than thinking about it. Third stage of it. You're going to point, same thing, same sequence, and you might point to a bunch of the same things because there's a restricted number of things in a theatre space. You're going to name anything that thing is not. Anything that thing is not. Okay. So I might go, field, unicorn, the concept of sadness, Paris, trees, anything apart from the thing which is happening, apart from the thing you're actually pointing at. Give that a go.
Engine, giraffe, rat, hamster.
So now you're trapped in a pattern of animals.
Right.
So if you notice a little pattern, right? Yeah. You went rat, giraffe, hamster. Break that. As soon as you notice a little pattern, just break yourself out of that and do something totally random.
Okay.
Carry on.
Dubai, Shakespeare, orange peel, philosophical works of Plato, Greece, rainbow, baby mice.
Beautiful. See,
it's tough.
Yeah, it's tough, but it's forcing you to just break your expected habits and sets of patterns or interactions with this world.
Yeah,
right. And
that's cool.
It's really, really nice. It's something. If I'm going to a gig that I'm really nervous about, so if it's a high pressure gig, if it's a new show, if it's a really big audience, then that's a thing that I'll do on my way there, just to kind of break myself out. Yeah, bring myself present. The other thing, which I mentioned a couple of times and is pretty obvious, that it's something that I do and I encourage people to do, is just meditation. I feel like improv is collective, fun meditation. It's the same thing folded differently. So what you just did is essentially a meditation. It's forcing you to be immediately present and not think before and not think after.
Right. And focusing on one thing.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So those were a couple of things that you can do. Yeah, solo improv is not really my specialisation because, as I said earlier, for me it's all about the collaboration thing. For me, it's all about the pair thing. And then we have video of some of the stuff which you can do with two people very, very easily, very, very quickly, which will just jolt you awake. And that's some of the stuff that we teach in a corporate context. And some of our clients, the big companies, will play some of those games for 5 minutes at the start of the meeting, so that everyone's not saying, "Well, I've got the things that I need to achieve in the meeting, and you've got the things that you need to achieve in the meeting. All right, let's fight," which is not a way that you want to have. That's not productive inside any company.
Okay, to finish up, I am going to fire you some quick fire questions.
All right.
Yeah. So these are probably less than 5 minutes.
Okay.
Take as little or as much time as you want.
For all of them or per question?
Per question.
Less than 5 minutes?
For the lot.
Okay, right.
Yeah, for the lot.
I'll try and be pithy.
Yeah. You ready?
Hit me.
Marmite, how does it make you feel?
I love it. I have it every morning with my scrambled eggs.
Really?
Yeah.
With scrambled eggs?
Yeah, so you get scrambled eggs, Marmite instead of salt, chili powder instead of pepper. It's amazing.
That is quite a find.
It's pretty amazing. It's pretty amazing. Also put it in baked beans.
Okay, favourite quote?
Oh, God. I am a massive over-quoter of people.
Yeah, you've had a lot of good quotes.
Yeah, I love a really good quote.
Sorry to force you into one.
Improv quote, I do love Bring a Brick, not the Cathedral, and the other one which I've already used today, which is you can argue with reality as much as you like, you'll always lose. Another lovely improv quote, Lee Simpson, which is improv is an invitation to presence.
Right. The Bring a Brick, not a Cathedral one, I've actually heard in a corporate training environment.
Oh, really?
Really liked it. Really cool. Very cool. A good book, film, or documentary you would suggest viewers check out?
I think every single person in the world should read Flow. I think every single person in the world should read Dancing in the Streets. I think every single person in the world should read Inside Jokes by Daniel Dennett and a couple of other people whose name I forget.
Okay. Wow, this.
Also, the new Blade Runner is great.
Is it?
It's really good.
Really?
It's the opposite of improvisation because it was so carefully planned and took 40 years
I'm
to make.
very scared to watch that.
It's brilliant.
Okay.
It's really great.
That's made me feel a bit better.
Unfortunately, it's still just as sexist as the original one, but if you can just close your eyes to then the film is beautiful.
Okay. Seems strange that we've been talking about presents, but if you could teleport anywhere in the world right now, or beyond, where would you teleport to?
I only have 2 things on my bucket list which I haven't done. One of them is see the Northern Lights, which is probably not quite the right time of year for it, so seeing Angkor Wat.
Angkor Wat, good choice. I've been there. It is completely mind-boggling.
Yeah.
You've been transported into the Game of Thrones. What's your garb and what weapon do you choose?
I don't know enough about Game of Thrones, but I have played some D&D and Skyrim and things. So a big mace that has a fire spell on it is always my choice in Skyrim. And what's my garb? I think I'd have one of those kind of slinky figure-hugging elf armour kind of things. I'd go for that.
Something you're proud of?
This place. This is most of a decade getting this place to where it is, and we've got a lot of great people doing great things, and it feels pretty good at the moment.
That is a lot to be proud of. And last thing, a beautiful moment you had in the last week.
Beautiful moment that I had in the last week. Ooh, that's an interesting one. The show that we had last night was our most technically complicated show that we've ever had. So as I was saying to you earlier, we had 5 singers, a DJ, a guy on beats, 2 musicians, 3 live illustrators, this kind of incredibly complicated thing. And I wasn't in the show or emceeing the show, I was just managing the house. There was this point about 10 minutes into the show where everyone was doing their jobs and the machine was all kind of working and cogs fitting together. I was like, okay, cool, this is really nice. It's been a stressful afternoon, but now I can just crack this beer and watch a really good improv show. So that was really lovely. And you can still catch that online. We live stream all our shows.
So where do people need to go and have a look at that stuff?
The nurserytheatre.com is where all of our classes and shows and stuff are. If you go to the Nursery Theatre YouTube, that's where we live stream all our shows, and they stay online for a week, and then we re-release some of them as kind of archive material. So there's 10, 15 shows, something like that, there which you can watch, and then the current shows which have just happened.
thenurserytheatre.com.
That's right.
That is where people need to go, and that is what people need to do to move forward in improvisation.
And there's Instagram and Twitter and all the stuff which I'm not allowed to touch.
Okay. Any other actions that you suggest people take if they're interested in this field?
Get to a class. I don't know if this is an action necessarily or a piece of advice. Not everyone, but a hell of a lot of people are really scared or adrenalized by the idea of doing improv. The hardest step is getting into the class. Once you're in there, you're going to have a lovely time with lovely people doing some stuff that's really, really fun, and then you're going to have this kind of explosion of joy and weirdness, and you end up in the pub having a drink with the people you did the class with, going, "What? I don't know what. Wow, that was weird." Just get yourself across the threshold into the classroom, and then everything else will follow.
And I highly, highly, highly recommend people do that. And particularly here, you've been so accommodating and generous.
Worries.
Even when I felt, really out of my comfort zone, you're coming along and go, that's exactly what we want. So I really do suggest people check it out. There's a lot of value to be had. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed.
Really appreciate
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Guys, I've got a bonus interview for you here with Julia, who's been training improv for over a year, and it's going to give you an idea of the short and mid-term benefits of training in improvisation. So I hope you enjoy it. Thanks.
Okay, here we are in the Nursery Theatre, and I'm with Julia. We have she's very kindly partnered with me to go through some improvisation exercises which were enlightening to say the least. Lots of getting out of the comfort zone, and Julia's been training in improv for around a year and a half.
Yeah.
So we're going to find out what that experience is like and the benefits connected with that kind of training. So what initially sparked your interest with improvisation? Why would you choose to do something which so many people would find quite scary?
Yeah. Well, I did a lot of theater when I was in school, but never really pursued it as a career or anything. And I wanted a very low commitment way of sort of getting back onto the stage, and because you don't have to study lines and you don't have to prep. I didn't even realize how much you have to rehearse to actually get good at improv, which I love now. But I definitely thought it was like, oh, you just run up there and you do some stuff and then you leave, right? That's how it works. And I wanted to be funny, really.
So you wanted to get back into the theatre.
Yeah.
And you wanted to be funny.
Yeah, I wanted to be funny.
Okay, so you're from the States.
Yes.
You came to the UK.
Yes.
You were here and you thought, let's get going. So where did you start? What happened?
Yeah, so I started actually just looking it up online, and there's a few really great schools. I went with literally the first search result, which at the time was Hoopla, which is another one of the comedy schools here.
A rival school?
Yeah. Okay. And they just had these beginning workshops on the weekends that were 3 hours long and were as sort of an intro taster. They called it an improv taster session. And I was quite nervous to go by myself, so I convinced my manager to come with me, and we took the class together. And this was really a stretch for him, because he was this army man who he had a really good sense of humor, but he definitely had never done theater, never done anything, and he really enjoyed it, and I absolutely became obsessed. So
so there was something in the first. So sorry, had you tried improv through your theater training?
I hadn't. No.
You hadn't. Okay.
No. We'd sometimes use it as warm up, so we just play some of the games like the kind that we'd played before, but never done scenes or anything like that.
So what is it about the feeling of that first time, which you were like, okay, I need to carry on with this?
Yeah.
What was that? I mean, I'm just from the exercises that we did. I mean, I can feel kind of endorphins. You feel a little bit high because there's a nervousness, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that makes some people back off. But yeah, what was it that you liked about
Yeah. Definitely the adrenaline. But mostly I think it was the creation of things with other people. So just, I remember so that you go through it, and towards the end you do actually play a little bit of games and scenes in front of the class. And I remember thinking, if anyone had ever tried to do this by themselves or wrote it down beforehand, this would have never existed. And it was so pure and funny, and it was just very human. It was funny in a truthful way as opposed to punchline funny, and there is improv that is punchline funny and all kinds of different improv, but when you start, it's usually just funny because you're watching people enjoying themselves and watching them delight in their own failures, and so I remembered thinking, I need to know more. I need to learn how to do this. And I thought it was actually quite like driving in the beginning. So when you first start driving, you're thinking about all the different, I have to look there, I have to check my mirror, I have to check that I'm, is the gear right, and press the brakes and everything else. And that after a while, it just becomes second nature and you can enjoy yourself doing other things meanwhile. And so I thought, I want to get to that place where it's just natural and I can really create things and make stories with people. And
do you feel like you've been going at it for a year and a half, do you feel like you've got some of that feeling?
A little bit. It's funny, it's one of those things where the more, like everything I suppose, the more you learn about it, the more you realize you don't know. Like a mountain that just keeps appearing, but in a wonderful way. So I think we refer to it as your improv tool belt or toolkit, a lot of folks, meaning there's lots of different techniques, there's lots of different styles. So for example, the nursery does a lot of inclusive improv, a lot of theatrical improv, which is somewhat unique to the nursery, and it's a really for example, you might see an improvised play here as opposed to a set of scenes, you'd see more organic, we call it as well, which I think Jules will cover a lot more about. But basically, it's a lot more natural of a way to play. And so you discover all these different styles and tools, and you start to learn not just what each of them is, but when to use which and how, and being able to combine them in different ways, surprising ways, based on what the other players are doing, what the scene needs, what's going on, how you're feeling, how the audience is feeling. And so it's almost like standing in front of a giant switchboard. And when you start to get a sense of the dials and how you can play with them, and after a while you get more and more dials. I'm using too many metaphors now. But basically,
driving, tool belt styles,
so many things. But yeah, so getting that, so I would say I have like maybe 5 of the 1,000 dials, if I had to guess. Okay.
So I'm interested to know a little bit about that journey. So and the skills that you've got through that year and a half. So you walked in like a year and a half ago, you tried it for the first time, and now we're looking like a year and a half later. What skills do you think that you've developed out of this training? What skills have you got that kind of feed into maybe everyday life, or confidence, or is there any crossover?
There's so much, and in fact I have tried to convince everyone at work to do improv, because so you get the confidence, you get more comfortable with presentation, things like that. For me, I think the most useful and surprising thing was being really comfortable with failure. And there's at work, there's a lot, especially different companies depending on what you work on. Some of them really like embracing failure, and they say, try things out. If it fails, great, move on. And you can say that, but to really feel it and to really be genuinely okay and not at all emotionally bothered by failure is something that I didn't expect I would just ever get. I didn't think that was possible, really. And that you could do it in such a sort of side, like a way that I wouldn't have expected, which is through improv, because you have to do it over and over and over and over again. It happens thousands of times, and then you just, after a while, it stops. You realize that actually, first of all, a lot of the time when you fail, that's funny, and it's funny to an audience because you're a person, and it's funny to watch you do the things that other people are afraid of doing, you become sort of immune to it, and you can make things with it.
So do you feel more free because of that?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I think these are some interesting points, because maybe getting comfortable with failure is a big one. I mean, because some people go through life and you know, they're still cut up about the failures from when they were like 15 or something.
Yeah.
So you've got this feeling more comfortable with failure. Obviously, you feel more confident. Do you feel? Are there any situations in life where you actually improvise now?
Yeah, I mean,
Does that make
all
sense?
of life is improvised.
Oh, okay.
But I know what you mean. Yeah, absolutely. I've had lots of situations at work, for example, where, oh, we forgot to invite you to this meeting. By the way, can you present this 10-minute thing you didn't prepare? Great.
Right. And how would you have felt before?
I would have been terrified. I would have been really focused on just going through the bullet points in my head. And now I trust myself a bit more and trust that I can read the room and I can remember. For me, a lot of the time, stress gets in the way of remembering things. I imagine that's a common thing. And so if I'm really worried about something and I'm trying to do the bullet points in my head, I won't remember them. But this takes away that stress. And so I can trust myself that when I need to remember whatever I needed to remember, it will come. And if not, I've let it go, and I'm okay with never remembering what it was. It doesn't bother me.
Right. Very, very cool. Is there anything unexpected that you've got out of this? I mean, you mentioned before that you didn't expect to get over failure through this. Is there anything else unexpected that
yeah, I think the community, particularly. So I think the type of people who naturally are attracted to improv tend to be the type of people that do it because it's collaborative, especially in London and in the way the London scene is built and the styles of improv that are popular here. And so the people that you meet have self-selected to sort of be like a nice human for the most part. And they really enjoy building things with people and sharing things and embracing that sort of mindset. And so you tend to just get this really incredible supportive community. Like actually my very first, so I started taking the first class that I took, and I went to see a show, and I was standing in line behind someone who was in a troupe, and he was American as well. We started talking, and the rest of the troupe came over, and because we were both American, they assumed we all knew each other. And so they started talking to me as if we were friends for years, and then when we sat down, they had saved me a seat, actually, because I was slightly further behind, and then and it only came out at the end of the show that we hadn't known each other before.
No one knew who you were.
Yeah,
right.
And that's completely normal. Like, that is standard behavior at an improv show.
There's a very open-hearted kind of community as well, where I guess people are they're kind of used to going through this process, so they're open-hearted, I would imagine. Yeah,
definitely.
And embracing you, because there's so much teamwork going on.
Exactly.
They're likely to do that in the community as well.
Yeah.
Really cool. I think the length of your experience in improv and the benefits that you've got out of it are going to provide quite a clear picture for people that may be thinking about trying it, why the hell they should try it. And they should try it, for sure.
You should try it.
You should try it.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks
Cheers,
so much.
Julia.
Yeah.
Hey, before you go, I just want to say thank you so much for watching or listening to this podcast. We really appreciate it. I'm trying to spread the idea of the Scholar Warrior concept, and we really appreciate you listening in. If you want to like us and subscribe to us, please go ahead, do that. Hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and if you want to follow us on social media, we're on Instagram, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook. If you want to hear older episodes, you can go to thescholarwarriorpodcast.com and you'll see older episodes there as well. Hope you enjoy those. So thanks again so much for listening, and watching. Please like, share, subscribe, and see you next time.